many different views, and I think it's exciting and interesting to see all the different ways that people come about this specific topic. Like there's young Earth creationists, which is what Neph is, and there's old Earth creationists, which is what people like Hugh Ross are, and then there's theistic evolutionists, like many of the scientists out there today. They all have a different approach, and I'm interested in how that mindset works. And I'm really excited about this debate with Neph tonight.
Hmm. Again, to clarify as well, thank you, Joe. This is a young Earth model, not the old Earth, to compensate for the 4.6 billion year Earth, which is about 1.3 billion years of a hydro uh, planet, which means to have water on the Earth. But this is the 6,000 to 6,500 year model that will be criticized, and we will allow Neff to introduce himself if you would like.
My name is Nephilimfree. My name is Evan Phillips. I go by Nephilimfree on YouTube. I'm a young Earth creationist. I came to believe that the biblical account of the global flood is true because of science, not because the Bible says so. Although I fully hold to the idea that if the Bible says it, it is true and it is to be believed. But I didn't come to the conclusion that the earth has been globally flooded based on what the Bible said. I came to it by studying the scientific evidence for it and against it. Uh, the debate tonight is not about the age of the earth. It's about whether or not the global flood is a real geologic event in history. And I intend to show evidences which cannot be accounted for by anything other than a rapid inundation, which was global. Uh, I think this idea that the Earth is billions of years old is easily believed, and that the flood of Noah is never happened is believed so easily by so many people in the world because men of science put it forth. They believe it, and they wish to hold to it, I think, for religious reasons. It's emotional ones, not scientific reasons. I think that's the basis for the reason that they actually hold to it, despite the mountains of evidence that is come forth. In fact, I believe that geology is now beginning to be, and will be in the next 50 years, the biggest bone breaker of the evolution theory because of the evidences, some of which I'm going to provide in this debate, which geologists today look at and scratch their heads and wonder, how is it that everywhere I'm seeing it's catastrophic events that created this? And they simply cannot account for it by uniformitarian processes. Uh, um, uh, Charles Lyell, who's considered the father of modern geology, pretty much, said that he believed he could cause people to no longer believe that he could steal science away from Moses, and he could do it within 30 years. In other words, it was his paradigm, his directive, his goal to cause the world not to believe in the flood of Noah. And people have believed that lie ever since.
Okay, so Neff, would you like to start by what you would, your opening statement, your construction of what you hope to achieve through this debate?
Absolutely, thank you.
So for 10 minutes.
Thank you. The first thing that I would show is that um, there are many features of the geomorphology of this Earth that cannot be explained by long deposition. See, the uniformitarianist camp believes that the present is the key to the past. That is, that the geologic processes going on in the Earth today, erosion and uplift of mountains and sinking of synclines, whatnot, is going on at about the same rate it always has on this Earth throughout history of the Earth for millions and millions of years, billions actually. But everywhere we look, we find catastrophic events that contradict that idea. In fact, features that cannot be explained by it. For example, the Coconino and Navajo sandstone formations begin abruptly on top of the Hermit Shale without gradation. There's no gradual deposition. We have the Hermit Shale, and boom, right on top of it, immediately, We have Navajo and Coconino sandstone. Now, that's not possible if that material were laid down by long deposition of uniformitarianism. It would be impossible because the material would gradiate from one to another. In fact, the Earth is covered by 1,800 meters, an average of, you get different estimates from different scientists, of sedimentary material that is sorted by particle size and density. And these strata going up deeply through the Earth have clear, distinct boundaries, one from another. And this cannot simply cannot be explained by long deposition. It's absolutely impossible, because if the material were laid down over a long period of time, as one material became less available to the Earth's environment in that area and another became more available, the materials would gradiate. But that's not what we see through the entire geologic column. One strata ends abruptly and another begins on top of it. Hydrology experiments prove that this is exactly how strata form, by horizontally moving water. So it's not a secret, it's known. But now, going to this Coconino and Navajo sandstone formation, these are silicates that were transported all the way to the southwestern United States by moving water from the New York area, from the Appalachian Mountains area. Now, there's only one way for that material to have gotten there. A secular geologist will tell you that it was transported there by normal uniformitarian processes over vast ages of time by wind and built up by wind. But this is not possible. We know today it was transported there from the Appalachian Mountains area. There's only one way for it to have gotten there, and that is by a powerful current of water moving across North America during the flood of Noah. And unless you believe that wind did it. Now, if you believe that wind, that's the Aeolian processes of the uniformitarianist, if you believe that wind transported these massive amounts of silicates all the way from the Appalachian Mountains to the southwestern United States over a vast amount of time, you'd have to believe in some really tricky magic. You'd have to believe that a massive wind current of hurricane gale strength carried billions of tons of sand from the Appalachian Mountains all the way to the southwestern United States without carving out a gorge in the United States, a mile deep and 10 miles wide. Now, who in their rational mind can believe that such a thing? Well, you can't. So there's no explanation for the Coconino. Now, these sandstone formations are tremendously huge. For example, the Navajo sandstone formation covers 400,000 square miles of the United States. 400,000. The Coconino sandstone formation averages 315 feet thick and covers 518,000 square miles. Now, how do you get that much sand transported from northeastern United States without eroding the surface of the entire continent? And what would happen to the mountains, the Appalachian Mountains, with that kind of wind? Well, they would not be there. The Tapeats sandstone and Redwall limestone of the Grand Canyon can be traced all the way across the United States and into Canada. In fact, even to England. Chalk beds in England are found, the same chalk beds are found on every continent of the Earth. Now, how do you get global layers of materials found on every continent? There's only one way. The whole continent, the whole Earth, was covered by water. It's the only possible explanation for it. In fact, the Milfy, Permian, and Quixia and Maracu limestone of southeastern China covers 1.2 million square miles. Now, I'm sorry, but wind and slow deposition by millions of years could not have laid that down. Now, I want to show, I would like to screen share something with you. Let me see if I can screen share here. I want to show you a graded bedding. Please tell me if I can, if what I'm sharing is showing up on the screen. Remy,
Sure.
Is it? Is it showing up?
Yeah, you are.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. These are cross beds. This is materials that were laid down. You can see the clear demarcations here. Here you've got cross beds. These are these slanted strata are laid down, and then all of a sudden the current of water that's laying this down changes direction and lays them down in another direction. Then it changes again. Then it changes again. Then it changes again. And wind does not do that. This is Navajo sandstone. This is what I'm talking about. The uniformitarianists will tell you that wind deposited this over millions of years, but it's simply impossible. What you're looking at is known by geologists to form in water. Only water can make it. And same here. This is the Coconino sandstone. You can see the clear demarcation right here where the water level had risen after this material was formed and then eroded and then dropped off again. This is not laid down by wind. This is carved out by water. These cleared strata with these lines, you can see the end boundary of one strata and the beginning of another, cannot be laid down by long deposition. They can only be laid down by moving water. Water sorts materials by density and grain size. And if these materials were laid down over a vast geologic time, you would have gradation from one end to the other. We do not see that going through the entire geologic column. That means the entire geologic column was created rapidly. Here's more graded beds. Beds going one direction, all of a sudden the currents of water passing over them changes direction, and now you've got graded bed going the other direction. That cannot happen by wind deposition. But if you ask a geologist what explains these formations, they'll tell you wind. This is impossible. Here again, graded beddings going in different directions, one right on top of the other. Look at the clear distinction between these materials. Water did this, not wind. It's impossible for wind to have done that. There's so much more that you can see. Look at these graded. Look at this. This is water deposited. The water current that comes across another powerful current and lays down the materials in another direction, and then another, and another, and another, and look how fine the boundaries are between them, because they were created by moving water, not wind. Now that's just one. Here's another powerful evidence for the flood of Noah. There's many of these on the earth. This is where a river ate through a mountain. Now water does not flow uphill. If this mountain were solid rock, when that water that became a river splashed up against it and hit it, it would find the path of least resistance and go around the mountain. But it didn't. Instead, it ran into the mountain, ate the mountain away, and kept on going. This cannot happen over millions of years. Water will not just keep bubbling into a mountain and eat through it. It will take the path of least resistance and go around. The reason for what you see here is because this whole mountain was soft sedimentary materials recently pushed up during the end of the flood of Noah, and a large local flood then came shortly after, and because the entire mountain was still soft materials full of water because it was recently pushed up out of the earth right after the flood of Noah, this material was soft and moist, and the river, which was splashing up against it, this powerful current of water released from a broken glacier or something, and it just ate right through that soft mountain. It wouldn't do that if it was solid rock. It had to be soft sediments for this river to have eaten through that mountain. And we see many of these on the earth, proving uniformitarianism is false. Folded mountains, I'll go into that in a minute if I can. First, let me explain what an anticline is. An anticline is materials which are this is an anticline here. It is the earth gets squeezed and it bends up. And what you're about to see is proof positive that the entire earth was soft sedimentary material after the flood of Noah and cannot be explained by uniformitarianism. When the earth gets squeezed because of pressure, it did as the continents were still moving across the earth during the flood during the flood of Noah. They bent, and that's why we have these bent strata in them. These are called an anticline. They can't be explained by long deposition because rock does not bend, except at very high temperatures deep in the earth. But we find these massive anticlines all over the earth, and these rocks.
I'm going to have to call time there.
Time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, Joe, would you like to have a cross-examination for 3 minutes?
Yeah, sure. Are you starting now?
Give me a sec here. I'll set the clock up here. And start.
Okay. Neph, how many people would you say it took to build the pyramids?
Well, I really don't know. Thousands, I assume.
Okay. What about the Tower of Babel?
Probably hundreds to thousands.
Hundreds of thousands, or just a
Hundreds,
hundred people?
hundreds
Oh,
to thousands.
okay. All right. Um, now, did they? Let's see. Do you, in terms of the secular geologic column, do you agree with the bulk of flood geologists that the Phanerozoic eon, which I would say is 542 million years to now, roughly? Would you say that that all the way up to the Pleistocene was all laid down by the flood?
I would say everything above the Cambrian was created by the flood. In fact, the Cambrian, everything that is not Precambrian was created by the flood, unless it's something on the surface of the Earth that could have been caused by a large local flood that took place shortly after the global flood.
Okay, so the Pleistocene is what is it? It's like just like roughly 2 million years ago. How would you say that and up is post the flood? Like
Mm.
how far back do the post flood
I think we'd
levels
have to
go?
investigate the individual thing that we're speaking of to discern that, if we could. I wouldn't just say the entire Pleistocene. I think that grouping it like that would be erroneous, because I believe that all of the imagined geologic ages of the Earth are actually episodes during the flood of Noah. They were all created during the flood, and so were created during a 1 year global
Okay.
event.
Okay, I guess I have one more question. How do you account for rhythmites like those found at the Green River Formation? These are sequences of thin beddings laid out in couplets, alternating through seasons. Um, so two of them represent 1 year. At the Green River Shale, there are almost 6 million layers of these rhythmites, and
Mm-hmm.
these follow sunspot cycles, higher astronomical cycles, and the 26,000 year precession of the equinox. Oh no, we don't have enough time. Um, how do you account for so many layers being laid down?
And that's time.
Okay.
I'm fine with him answering it if he wants.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Nephilim, would you like to take the
Yeah,
time
sure. I'll
for
answer.
8 minutes? Very good.
I'll answer his question first, if that's allowable, and then take my 8 minutes if you wanted. Well, no, wait. He was asking simply questions.
Yeah, that's up to you, Joe. Would you like to give Neff a
Would you
separate
like?
time to answer your last question, or?
Do you want me to go ahead and begin my 8 minutes, or answer that question?
Why don't you begin your 8 minutes? How about
Okay,
that?
I'll begin my 8 minutes.
All right, hang on a second here. I'll get it started. All right, start.
Okay. As for the Green River Formation in Wyoming, I would refer you to Lance Grande, Paleontology of the Green River Formation, with a review of the fish fauna, a geologic surveying of Wyoming, Bulletin 63, 1984. There is the stratified materials of the Green River Formation in Wyoming don't allow for uniformitarian processes to explain them. And I would say that when it comes to things like varves and what you mentioned, uniformitarianists make many false assumptions of these things. And for example, polystrate fossils have been found in varves, so proving that the varve was not laid down over each varve accounts for a whole year, because a leaf will not stand upright at the bottom of a lake or pond and while it's rotting for a whole year. And so you find a leaf going through numerous varves. There's a problem with how old you believe those varves are and how quickly they were laid down. Now, as for these the formations that you speak of, I haven't heard you provide any questions that really cause any kind of a stumbling block for a creationist. You mentioned the Pleistocene. All of these geologic eras of time, if taken, if we look at the actual evidence for it, they're simply during slices of the flood of Noah. And the reason we can know that is because there's no geologic time in between the strata. in between these imagined eras of time. These are completely figments of imagination based on the age of the Earth and mixed with the evolution theory. So if you believe that a certain creature lived during a certain age of time, you're gonna and we find these creatures predominantly, if not exclusively, in certain strata of the Earth because of where they lived and the location they lived in when they were buried, because of the, during at what time of the flood they were struck by the waters. Then you're going to believe that, well, they're 50 million years old, they're 500 million years old, because this is where we find them in the depth we find them in the Earth. And so there's all kinds of circular reasoning that goes to the geologic column with the uniformitarianists. Date the rock by the fossil, by the rock, by the layer, by the rock, by the fossil, by the rock, by the layer. And it goes in round and round and round and around. But, for example, what evolutionists fail to recognize is, for example, they'll say, well, the Cambrian proves the flood of Noah didn't happen because it existed so deep. We only find these Cambrian creatures deep in the earth unless they're pushed up at the, in the Burgess Shale or somewhere the earth has uplifted them. But the problem with that argument is completely ignores the obvious. Where do these creatures live? Well, they live in shallow waters at the edges of land, right? Where do you expect them to be when the flood comes? In shallow waters around the edges of land. Why should we find them anywhere else? Because they were buried in situ, right where they sat, buried alive. And they didn't have time to get around and go anywhere else. So they were buried on the spot. That's why we find Cambrian creatures, unless they've been uplifted by geologic movement of the earth, strictly in the Cambrian era. The geologic time applied to the geologic column is based on circular reasoning. You date the rock by the fossil, by the rock layer, by the rock, by the fossil, by the layer, and you use index fossils. Now, the index fossils are based on evolution theory, so it goes in a circle. When did that particular fish live? Well, we believe that one was 260 million years ago. Well, how old is the strata then? Well, it's 260 million years old. So when we date the rock and we get a different age, we find 5 different ages. We pick the one closest to 260 million years and throw the rest of them out and say, oh, look, their dating method verified it was 260 million years. Forget the date that was, 180 and the one that was 210 and the one that was 360. We throw those away. We found one that's closest to it. We're going to go with that. That's called circular reasoning. And it's not scientific. But now, so I really don't know where to go. You've asked me some questions that were really, I don't think they were, honestly. I'm not trying to be facetious. I didn't even see them as a challenge, and I don't know what to do with the rest of my time, except to maybe show you something, if I could. Let's see. Let's see.
Neph, I'll give you 20 seconds after I say something, but
okay.
I'd like to elaborate on which points he made that were troubling or not engaging.
Yeah, well, I think I addressed them. I may have left one out. I don't know.
Yeah, but in particular right now as you're going along.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, if we had the flood of Noah took place and it lasted for a year, and then and these various strata have no geologic time in between them because there's an absence of erosion between all these strata going up through the whole geologic column, then we know these strata were laid down one on top of the other. So it's clearly arbitrary if you're going to say, well, this era ends here and this one begins there, and this area ends here, and the Pleistocene ends here and the Tertiary begins there. That's just completely arbitrary. It's based on evolution theory and uniformitarianism and a combination of the two. And it's not actually a scientific thing. It's based on an idea that the Earth is millions of years old, and uniformitarianism is true, that the processes of the Earth going on at roughly the same rate now as they always have in the past. It explains these things, but it actually can't. So, if there's no erosion between the strata and they have clear, distinct boundaries going up through the whole geologic column, then all of these areas, Jurassic, the Devonian, all of them, are all just lying right smack on top of each other. And which strata constitutes the Devonian is strictly up to the person's idea about how old the Earth is and about uniformitarianism, not empirical scientific evidence. I would say there's no scientific, empirical scientific evidence for measuring the rate, the age of anything. Excuse me. The best we can do is come up with limiting factors, like uh, like limiting factor is like, well, for example, how this is almost getting into the age of the Earth, but the rate at which carbon-14 is created and destroyed in the upper atmosphere of the Earth by the sun, that would be a limiting factor. It's 30,000 years. What's the limiting factor between the strata? Well, there's none. There's no erosion between strata, and they have clear, distinct boundaries, one on top of the other, going through the whole 8 geologic column. 1,800 meters worth of it, or more, an average across the continents. So where does one geologic event begin and another if there's no erosion between them? When does one era begin? It's just arbitrary. It's left up to the evolutionists' idea based on when they believe certain creatures lived on the Earth which are extinct today. And what we see is today is this. A creature is either extinct or it still lives. We don't see change. We don't see anatomical change, no evolutionary change. Creatures are exactly as they were today, or as they have always been, with slight variation, color, size, shape, and pattern. No anatomical change, no evolution, therefore. So the fossil record is this. A creature is still with us, or it's extinct. Now, if it's extinct, the uniformitarianist looks at it and says, oh, these creatures only lived in this great period of time in the distant past, and that's where they build their ideas. I'm done.
All right, Joe, it is your turn to start for 10 minutes on your opening and constructive thesis, or whatever your
Sure.
your argument against,
Okay.
or but try to keep it as an advice, because I've seen enough debates to know. Don't spend much time at all on responding to what he said. Keep your mind clear on what you came here with, rather than what he's already said. Because otherwise you'll be wasting your time.
Sure, I have a prepared statement. Don't worry.
Okay. Obviously you can do that later on in the last few minutes of your 10 minutes. All right. Anyways, let's see here.
All right. So
here, I'll start 10 minutes.
All right. Thank you, Evan. Thank you, Evan, Remy, and everyone for making this debate possible. The Genesis flood, as recounted in the Old Testament, is not supported by the evidence. To demonstrate this, I messed up already. Okay. To show my contention that the flood model is not supported by the evidence, I will evaluate it in relation to what makes a good scientific model. A good scientific model is 1. Simple, 2. Fits our background knowledge, 3. Has explanatory power, and 4. Has predictive novelty. Surveying the evidence shows us that the flood model has none of these qualities and so fails to stand as a good scientific model of the evidence. First, the flood model is not simple. The flood is supposed to have lasted 1 year, resulting in all the sedimentary layers of geology. Creation scientists themselves have identified desiccation, which are dried mud cracks, often associated with raindrop impressions, in layers such as the Navajo sandstone, and also, I believe, some other formations that Neph has already mentioned. They've also identified fusane, which is fossil charcoal, and continental basalts, which is lava cooled above ground, all as geological examples showing long passages of time. Each and every one has been identified by creationists, not evolutionists, in strata ranging from the Pleistocene to the Cambrian. These findings have required countless excuses to multiply from creationists, making the flood model convoluted and cluttered. For example, Evan has failed to account for ichnites, the impressions made by ancient organisms while they were still alive. These include trackways, burrows, dens, fecal debris, and all of these are found in the geologic record. These trace fossils are in countless layers that supposedly make up the flood, and most do not show the trackways or burrows of animals reacting to a catastrophic event either. Instead, they show the movements of animals living a normal day. Many other excuses are falsified or unsupported by the evidence, which I will cover in my rebuttal period. Evan has not offered anything to clean up this mess, so the flood model is thereby far from simple. Next, the flood model does not fit with our background knowledge. Answers in Genesis estimates the Djoser pyramid required 30,000 people to build in 2100 BCE, 250 years after the flood. Our background knowledge from historical, archaeological, and geological evidences points to Egypt existing 2,000 years before the flood. Ancient China, Mesopotamia, the Indus River Valley, and Acadia all were established by the time Noah's flood supposedly occurred. The flood model does not fit well with our background knowledge of ancient civilizations. It also fails to match up with our background knowledge on population growth rates. If we take the creation timeline for the sake of argument, we'll see the fantastic growth rates creationists require us to accept if 6 people populated the entire world starting 4,000 years ago. The flood ended in 2350 BCE, and the Tower of Babel was in 2250 BCE. If it took 30,000 people to build the Djoser pyramid, then imagine how many more people are needed to build the Tower of Babel, which was so monumental that it upset God. Furthermore, the Tower of Babel occurred in Genesis 11, and in Genesis 10, the cities of Akkad, Admah, Calah, Erech, and Lasha are all mentioned. Erech, which scholars agree is the city of Uruk, at one point had a population of 50,000 residents. In order to get to our current population, AIG claimed that it doubled every 150 years, or had a growth rate percentage of 0.49%. Using the same population growth calculation, I was generous and calculated the growth rate for 35,000 people to exist around 2250 BCE when the Tower of Babel was built. The percentage rate that I got was 6%. That is almost 12 times more than the percentage rate gathered by Answers in Genesis to populate our current population. If that were the population growth rate that we actually do see, then there would be over 30 billion people populating Earth today. Thus, the flood model fails to fit our background knowledge, even if we lower our expectations. Remember, before the flood even occurred, the Scottish Pompeii Skara Brae was abandoned and Stonehenge had already been erected. My last 2 points are the flood model has poor explanatory power. On the flood model, biogeography, archaeology, history, and many other things are not explained in a meaningful or useful manner. How much time do I have, guys? I have 5 minutes? Okay, good. 4 minutes, okay. The flood fails to explain the apparent rapid pace of biodiversity required if the animals on the ark are responsible for all the animals we see today. For example, Answers in Genesis identifies one elephant kind on the ark. This elephant kind supposedly gave rise to the mastodon before 2250 BCE, then the woolly mammoth by 2100 BCE, and the 2 extant genera of elephants, the African and the Asian. The Asian elephant is found on Indus River Valley seals dating to 1900 BCE. This means that the elephant kind from the ark gave rise to the mastodon in roughly 100 years, the mammoth in roughly 200 years, and at least the Asian elephant in less than 500 years. Furthermore, these new kinds were supposed to already be in Africa, Central Asia, the Middle East, and North America for the mammoth in less than 500 years. No evidence supports this, nor does this explain the biogeography we do see today. Hence, I got confused. Okay. I heard the noise, sorry. Hence, the flood model has poor explanatory power. Finally, the flood model lacks predictive novelty. Many of the predictions one would expect to see if the flood model were true have turned out to be false. For example, the flood model would predict the fossil record of the flood layer to have a jumble of fossils mixed together with respect to a fluvial catastrophic event. Humans mixed with dinosaurs, trilobites with mammoths, etc., etc. We should expect that Noah and all of his family were biological hosts to tuberculosis, smallpox, and even gonorrhea, since such pathogens could not have survived the flood outside of a biological host. But we don't. Instead, according to Stephen Jay Gould, quote, the outstanding fact of the fossil record is that rather than mixing together all the animals, that the geologic record is very well ordered. We have sequence of strata, and different kinds of animals and plants characterize different layers of the strata. And we are not even given any evidence explaining how the human survivors survived and reproduced further generations while hosting multiple harmful and even fatal diseases. Thus, the flood model fails to fulfill any predictions it makes, making it a poor scientific model. In sum, we've seen that the flood model is not simple, does not fit our background knowledge, has nil explanatory power, and has failed to make any novel predictions. In demonstrating this, I have presented specific pieces of evidences, ranging from geology to biology to history. In order to show that the flood model is a good scientific model, and so support the evidence, Evan must dispute all the evidence I have presented and erect a flood model which fulfills the 4 requirements for a good scientific model, as I have mentioned. From hearing Evan's opening speech, it does not look like he's done this. Until he does that, I maintain that the flood model is not supported by the evidence. And anything that Evan did bring up in both of his opening and so forth, I will continue to address in my rebuttal period.
Are you ending now? Because you got 10 seconds left.
Okay, and yeah, I'm ending now.
All right. So, Neph, if you would like to take 3 minutes, give me a sec here.
Okay.
All right. Tell me when you're ready.
I'm ready.
All right, go.
Okay, I could easily respond to each of the points that he made. There's creationist explanations, arguments against them. But my time is now for asking questions. So, Joe, I would ask, these are going to be some tough questions. I would ask you, how can millions of tons of silicates be transported from the Appalachian Mountains to the southwestern United States by hurricane strength forces without gouging out the North American continent? Why isn't there evidence of wind erosion doing such horrific things to the continent, even the Appalachian Mountains, if it transported millions of tons of sand all the way from the Appalachian Mountains and if it was not water that transported these, but wind, as the secular geologists believe, to the southwestern United States? I would ask, how can an anticline, which is folded strata which have been uplifted out of the earth by horizontal pressure in the continent, bending this material, how can an anticline be formed if these materials are millions of years old of solid rock? Can you please tell us why you believe that rock is so rubbery in the past and obviously so brittle today? So how can anticlines form near or at the surface of the earth? But because they are a solid rock, and if they weren't soft sediment material laid down by the flood of Noah and bent recently after the flood, instead of after they had concreted into stone millions of years ago, because rock does not bend except at high temperature deep in the earth. So how did so many anticlines near or on the surface of the earth get formed? Can you explain why you're willing to believe, or if you believe, that solid rock was rubbery in the past when it's not anymore? Can you also tell us, I would say, if you believe that there were once deep in the earth, how did these anticlines be uplifted and not broken? Crumbled, in fact. I would ask, Also, how can large-scale graded bedding be produced by long geologic time spans by wind if it wasn't formed by water? And why doesn't these found all over the Earth explain a global flood? How is it that we have nearly complete fossils of crustaceans, fish, and even some dinosaur bones in chalk deposits around the world when uniformitarianists believe they formed at the rate of 1 to 2 centimeters per 1,000 years? How can you have these fossils in them? And as for the questions you made, I would ask you, are you aware of a fossil of a human sandal print stepping on a trilobite that is known to exist? I would ask you, if you believe that parasites could not have existed on the animals of the Ark, which you said they could not have existed, they could not have survived the flood, I would ask you if for some reason you believe that parasites could not have been in the animals that were on the Ark
Okay,
for
that's
some
clear.
reason.
So, Joe, would you like to take 8 minutes for a rebuttal?
Sure, yeah.
Oh, give me a
Well,
second.
really,
I'm going to restart it here.
okay.
Oh, come on. I clicked one little button and it thinks I'm trying to search. And reset. Watchwell, it's on stopwatch. All right, so 800 and start.
Oh, okay. Wow. Well, okay. To answer Neff's questions, he asked how can silicates be transported from the Appalachian Mountains all the way to where the Navajo sandstone and I think the Coconino sandstone, but definitely Navajo sandstone. And the thing is that uniformitarians, not even uniformitarians actually, actualists, which are what geologists would call themselves today, do not think that it was all through wind action only. There are plenty of different types of tranquil, long deposition phenomenon that occur that are also underwater that could also bring these silicates to the areas that he's talking about to eventually form sandstones. What else? The anticline. It seems odd that he, in one sense, I feel as though Neph is agreeing that there are plate tectonics, but that's not agreed. But that's something that's uh, shied away from most other creationists. And at the same time, he then says, how can we have these anticlines forming? Um, and this relates to his argument. How is it that whether or not I believe that rocks were rubbery back then? Actually, no, I don't. I believe you kind of answered your own question in that when you said that once rocks are put under low pressure, they not low pressure. When rocks have layers and layers weighed down on it, and once it gets deeper under earth, it's put under high heat and more pressure, and slowly you get what are called slick and slides. That means that rocks will curve and that they will make all the curves that are discussed. The issue is that hopefully I've answered. If I'm sorry if I haven't. Also, the trilobite stepped on by a human. I'm actually surprised you're using that argument because even I think that's one of the creationist arguments that creationists tell each other not to use anymore. I think it's either the Paloxy creationist footprints, or it's ones that I believe are also in Texas. Anyways, let's see if Neph actually answered uh, my responses. I charged him to see if he can have see if he constructed a good scientific model, and one of those ways is to see if it's simple. And so far, Neph hasn't addressed the desiccation, which are mud cracks all around the world, which show that a layer was dried out and occurred from the sun, and then more depositions were laid over it. Neither was he able to account for fusane, which is fossilized charcoal, which have been found in Cretaceous deposits in North America, in Kentucky and Pennsylvania. And this is really important because fire can't burn underwater. So how could this fossilized charcoal formed when floods are required to when floodwaters are required to lay down all the deposition? This charcoal would not have formed if that's the case. He also failed to address um, continental basalts, which is lava layer that comes out and becomes a layer on the Earth that oh gosh, sorry, I'm being kind of distracted by what's being said in the chat. I didn't know that people would be invited in here. Um, but yeah, even creationists like Michael Ord, Whitner, and Gardner have identified all three of these things, continental basalts included, as showing that certain layers could not be the flood layers. And as it turns out, all the layers that they identified end up going all the way down to the Cambrian. And he's also failed to respond to anything I've said about ichnites, which are the trackways and other other prehistoric animal trace fossils. There's also dinosaur nests that he needs to respond to, and burrows of various invertebrates from even pre-Cambrian show that such creatures were spiraling around looking for food. They were not in a catastrophic event. So how could there be all these different burrowing invertebrates in all the different layers, completely oblivious to a catastrophic flood taking over their whole entire lives and killing them all? His arguments also fail to fit with our background knowledge. This gets worse if we add the ancient structures of South America, like the Sican Bajo in Peru, which is dated before the flood. And why isn't there flood damage to other structures like the Stonehenge or like the Straw Barra, which I mentioned earlier, which Neph has not responded? Again, Tower of Babel must have taken at least more than 30,000 people to construct it. The Djoser Pyramid, according to Answers in Genesis, took 30,000 people to construct. And he's never addressed why, how is it that the population grew so large in order to build all these structures all around the world? Again, not just in Egypt, not just in ancient Mesopotamia, but also in Scotland and England and in South America. He never presented anything to show that his model has explanatory power, and this is looking really bad for Neph because not only has he failed to explain the rapid speciation that's required to have the mastodon show up less than 100 years after the flood, but he also needs to explain how lions showed up all over ancient. In the ancient Near East, there's depictions of lions being hunted within less than 300 years of the supposed flood event. How could all this biodiversity have occurred in such a short amount of time? Geneticists won't agree to that, and I don't know how creationists will explain that. Finally, it has no predictive power because there are no trilobites in later layers, unlike the thing that Neph said, which was falsified in the 80s. And he cannot come from, and all these diseases could not come from anyone else but the animals and the people on the ark. How did these animals and these people survive having multiple fatal and deadly diseases in them while on the ark? Thank you.
And that's time. All right, so you both have another 5 minutes afterwards. Neph or Evan, you will start with your 5-minute rebuttal to what he has just said.
Sure.
Give me a sec here. I gotta restart it. And start.
Okay. Um, well, to quickly address some things. Nobody has refuted the trilobite sandal fossil, as my opponent has claimed, or the Paluxy tracks. People have denied them. Nobody's refuted them. You can't deny two types of creatures' foot tracks in the same strata if it's solid rock, unless you believe somebody carved it. And these have been studied with a hospital CT scanner, going millimeter down by millimeter. We see the stress marks inside the material before it was concreted into stone, proving it was an actual fossil track. Nobody can refute that. It's been proven with a hospital CT scanner. As for charcoal buried during the flood, how do you get that? It's easy. The global flood was a geologic event that caused volcanoes to erupt all over the earth. As this material was being poured out of volcanoes, it was also being buried by strata, and so you'll find charcoal in the geologic column only because of the flood of Noah. Michael Ord has, if he says Michael Ord has found deposits that have been can't be explained, were not created by the flood. What my opponent's leaving out is the explanation for how they are explained by the flood. What I mean by that is they may not have taken place during the flood, but he might be pointing to something that's taken place after the flood. My opponent's trying to make you believe that it had to have been created during the flood for it to have been the flood to be true. As for bioturbation, that is burrowing. He mentions burrowing throughout the geologic column. That's actually, I hate to say it this cold, but true. That's misinformation. The truth is, and actual geologists will acknowledge to you if you question them about it, there is astonishing absence of bioturbation throughout the whole geologic column. It's missing. It should not be. Unless creatures suddenly learn to burrow during the tertiary for some reason, there should be gobs of bioturbation throughout the geologic column. It's missing. So my opponent is given false information there. That's not correct scientifically. As for how do you get various types of elephants, they're not different kinds. There's no need to explain them. Pathogens lived on the animals on the ark. His problems with societies, the age of societies, easily explained. The secular timeline for everything is based on uniformitarianism, including when the pyramids of Egypt were built in the Egyptian kings list. So one parallel is circular reasoning again, goes in circles, goes in circles, goes in circles. You believe the age of the earth, you believe the age of this society, you believe that and everything. It's one supports the other, supports the other. It's one hand washing the other. But now I've shown features of this earth that cannot be explained by uniformitarianist processes, and I'm going to show you one on the screen right now. This is an anticline comprised of two completely different materials. This cannot exist if uniformitarianism is true. What you see on the screen. Because you have one completely different type of material with another type of material on top of it. Both had to be soft sedimentary material squeezed by tectonic materials. By the way, plate tectonics was an idea put forth by young earth creationists. That idea came from creationists, not uniformitarianists. You see this anticline? It cannot have been formed over long deposition. It proves this rock did not bend. These were both soft sedimentary materials that were bent by pressures in the earth and uplifted while they were still soft and sedimentary, laid down by water. Anticlines cannot be explained by uniformitarianism. Rock does not bend, it breaks. Everywhere you see an anticline on this planet, and there are millions of them, is something that cannot be explained by anything but the flood of Noah, such as that one, or these. That was soft sedimentary material when it was formed. The features of the earth that I've explained cannot be explained by long-term deposition. It is impossible. And as my final argument, I want to show you Sheep Mountain in Wyoming. This mountain is soft sediment materials that was squeezed together. This is a giant anticline. Squeezed up out of the earth, you can see the horizontal pressure has pushed this mountain clean up out of the earth. You can see from in this aerial photograph about 10 miles above, 5 miles above the earth, that this mountain was squeezed up out of the earth when all of this material was soft sedimentary material left by the flood of Noah. It had to have all been still soft and moist because rock doesn't bend. So it is impossible for uniformitarianism to explain the geomorphology of the earth because rock doesn't bend. These are on the surface of the earth, not deep in the earth where it's hot enough to bend stone, which takes place slowly at high temperature. at least 500 degrees centigrade. Now, this is at the surface. All this took place on the surface because you can see the bent materials all the way around this mountain. And the mountain was squeezed up out of the earth right in the middle of it all. This took place on the surface of the earth where it's cold, not down deep in the earth where rock can bend. And so I have shown with anticlines folded mountains, folded strata, cutaways, mountains like this one where a river ate right through a mountain. There was soft sedimentary material left behind by the flood. I have shown adequate geologic evidence of the entire geomorphology of the earth is explainable only by the flood of Noah. Because rock, and for no other reason than this, rock doesn't bend. And so all these anticlines, folded strata, folded mountains with not undeformed fossils, unburnt fossils littered through them can only be explained if all this material across the entire geologic column of all the earth was soft sedimentary material to which pressure was applied, which caused it to bend, therefore wiping away the millions of years of uniformitarianism in a fell swoop.
All right, that's time. Joe, I'm going to give you 30 extra seconds, so give me a sec here. And and start.
All right. Well, let's go over Neph's evidence and see if it holds up with the criteria that I mentioned. Let's see if it's simple, if it fits with our background knowledge, if it has explanatory scope, and if it has predictable novelty. So far, I've heard no effort whatsoever on Neph's part to see if he can make his flood model into a good scientific model. At most, he's tried to stick with just the geologic anomalies that he thinks that geologists cannot explain. For example, he said that. For example, he showed anticlines and repeatedly said that these rocks could not have formed underground in certain layers, underground under heat and pressure. But then he mentions at the same time plate tectonics and uplift, which actually does show that these certain geological phenomena can occur underground and then later be uplifted, which shows geologic time, which refutes his own argument. He says that bioturbation is misinformation. I know that a former creationist, Glenn Morton, has identified bioturbation at least in the Ordovician and in the Cambrian and in other areas around. For example, he's also found in areas like Wyoming and on the Atlantic coastal shelf. All of these are in different geologic layers, which discount the flood model. The flood only occurred in 1 year. Now, Neff's answers to at least, let's see how Neff actually answered my arguments. He didn't respond to the desiccation, which means that Neff has no answer to why there are mud cracks, fossilized mud cracks on layers. These fossilized mud cracks also have raindrop imprints in them that show that a long period of time had to occur and show that these mud cracks had to dry. He tried to answer the fusane, which is fossilized charcoal, but by saying that this is the result of volcanoes. The issue is that much of this is associated with other bioforms in the strata. It's associated with biomass that eventually became coal. And this biomass that eventually became coal, it could only have been affected by volcanoes in so many ways. The volcano reaction would have left the continental basalt, or it would have left the basalt plume because of all the water. But we don't see either of those mixed in with this fusane fossil, so he couldn't address that. He also didn't address continental basalts, like I mentioned. He also tried to address the Ichnites. Actually, no, he did not address the Ichnites, which show that time passed and that animals were going about their daily routine in several layers of this supposed one one layer of not one layer, sorry, 1 year event of the flood. He also hasn't explained how the population of 6 people can jump to 30,000 people to make the Djoser Pyramid 200 and so many years later, but also how it could be even larger to build the Tower of Babel and also populate 5 other cities. Not even 5 other cities referenced in the Bible, but tons of other cities all around the world, like in the UK and in South America. Uh, his uh, his flood model fails to have any explanatory power because he basically dismissed the clear evidence of the elephants speciating. It is answers in Genesis. It is creationists who say there was only one elephant kind on the ark, and that elephant kind, all of a sudden, 100 years later, was accompanied with a mastodon, and then 150 years later, accompanied with a woolly mammoth, and then in less than 500 years, accompanied with the Asian elephant. He gave no answers to any of that, and he just dismissed them because it feels as though he's not really clear on how important this evidence is against his side. Finally, his model has um, failed to predict anything in the fossil record. Um, the tracks that he's mentioned were debunked in the 80s, and it's simple. It's obvious that simple organisms go all the way up to more complex organisms in the past. So I think that the flood model fails at being a good scientific model, and so fails to address all of the evidence given by the world today. And so we should reject it. Thank
All
you.
right, that's time. All right, Neph, you can have 5 minutes to do your closing
Wait, what?
statement. Sorry?
Why does he get 5 more minutes?
No,
No,
it's
no,
not five.
we've done our 5 minutes
No,
speak.
no. This is standard debate. Standard debate has 5 minutes of closing statement.
That's what we just.
That's not
Yeah, we
rebuttal.
just did.
We
This was
just did
my.
our we
Okay.
just did our 5 minutes. At this point, I'll just say thank you, Joe, for debating the subject with me. I'm going to have a hangout in a few minutes here where people can discuss the things that we've talked about in this debate. And you're welcome to join that hangout and discuss these things further with me if you like. But whether you do or not, I want to thank you for joining this debate to discuss
Yeah, thank you.
to debate with me.
Yeah, thank you. This was my first time ever formal debate, so thank you. Yeah, I had a lot of fun. Did you?
Yes, I enjoyed it thoroughly. Thank you so
All
much.
right, cool. All right, thanks.
All right, so anybody who's watching, there's 3 of you. There is going to be a chat room, as Neph said, later on. And if Joe would like to later on as well, you can have your own chat room. But there will be links to that soon on my page and Neph's page. So anybody would like to come to the reception afterwards. Anyways,
Okay. I want to thank Remy too for being a great sport and hosting this debate for us and running being our timer guy and our moderator. Thank you, Remy, for that. I appreciate you taking the time out of your life to do this for us.
Yeah, thanks, Remy.
And that was an hour and 10 minutes running time. So thank you for watching, people, and thank you for Joe for participating, and thank you, Neph, for hosting.
Thank you.